So what are all the things that we saw in the last 3 classes? First, we'll just have a quick recap and then we'll go into the today's topic. So biological classification means, so first we saw what is the need for biological classification. What is the need to classify the living organisms into different categories? And there are different types of classification, like 2 kingdom classification and then 5 kingdom classification. And because there were so many drawbacks in the two kingdom classification, and so we he classified the living organisms into 5 kingdoms, that is Kingdom Monera, Kingdom Protista, Kingdom Fungi, Kingdom Plantae, and Kingdom Animalia. So the primitive organisms are placed under the Kingdom Monera. So the Monera includes all the prokaryotes. So prokaryotes are placed under Kingdom Monera, and then the next kingdom that we saw is Kingdom Protista, and this Protista include all unicellular eukaryotes. So there's a gradual progression in the level of the organisms which are present in the particular kingdom. And then next is the Kingdom Fungi. So the next step of evolutionary thing is, in the Protista we saw as unicellular eukaryotes. Here it became multicellular eukaryotes. And other characteristic features that we saw under the Kingdom Monera are different types of bacteria like archaebacteria and eubacteria. And then in the case of Protista, we saw different types of organisms like dinoflagellates, diatoms, and also several euglenoid-like organisms, and then slime molds and protozoans. So it included all the plant-like protists, fungal-like protists, and also the animal-like protists. So they, from those protists, those organisms, they evolved the still higher level of organisms. So in fungi, we saw the multicellular eukaryotes and also yeast, which is a unicellular organism, and it is placed under Kingdom Fungi. So today we'll see in detail about the Kingdom Plantae and Kingdom Animalia. So these Plantae and Animalia, they form a separate kingdom because there are huge variety of plants and also there are huge variety of animals. So actually they have given it as a separate chapter itself. For plant kingdom, there is a separate chapter and there is a separate chapter as animal kingdom. So we'll see just the features, so what are the features of animal kingdom that differentiate these organisms from other kingdom, and also about the animal kingdom and how the organisms in the animal kingdom are differentiated from other kingdom. So today we'll see about the Kingdom Plantae and Animalia. So first one is Kingdom Plantae. So what do you mean by Plantae? You all know that we are surrounded by so many varieties of plants. So what are the characteristic features of plants? First one is they are eukaryotes. So they have the well-defined nucleus and they are surrounded by the nuclear membrane, and also membrane-bound organelles are present in the plants. So eukaryotes, and they are chlorophyll-containing organisms. So what is the role of chlorophyll? It absorbs the light, so helps in photosynthesis. So eukaryotic chlorophyll-containing organism, and the other characteristic feature is the cellulosic cell wall. Cell wall is one of the characteristic feature in plants that differentiate it from the organisms in other kingdom. Animals do not have cell wall, but plants have the cell wall, and it is made up of cellulose. And the difference between the fungal cell, that is fungal cell wall, and the plant cell wall is that the fungal cell wall is composed of chitin, but here it is made up of cellulose in the case of fungi. So that is one of the difference. And if you take the plants, some are partial heterotrophs. So what do you mean by partial heterotrophs? Such as insectivorous plants. Insectivorous plants, example are bladderwort and Venus flytrap. So you know the term heterotrophs. That is, they are dependent on other organisms for food. But here they are partial heterotrophs. So these plants actually, they can prepare their own food, but they are partially dependent on other organisms for preparing the food. For example, in the case of insectivorous plants, also called the carnivorous plants or carnivorous plants. So what these plants do, they'll trap the insects. For example, if you see here, whatever the insects that are coming and sitting there for pollination and all, for it is for taking the honey or nectar, those insects are getting trapped. So these insectivorous plants, they trap the insects and they use that for their nitrogen content. Actually, these insectivorous plants, they grow in a type of soil that is muddy soil, where the soil is deficient in nitrogen. So they get their nitrogen from these trapped animals. Get nitrogen from the trapped insects. So this is the main feature of the insectivorous or carnivorous plants. Actually, they can synthesize their own food, but that nitrogen content is obtained from these trapped insects in the case of insectivorous or the carnivorous plants. And some plants are parasites. So what do you mean by parasites? They are dependent on other living organisms. That is, they can live only in the host animal with the help of the host. Example is Cascata. For example, if you see there are some creepers and all, they are dependent on the host plant for its survival. So they have the special type of structure that is called hastoria. And what these structures will do is they'll penetrate into the host plant and they will derive the nutrients from the host plant. So they act only as a parasite. And there are several types like total parasite, that is obligate parasite, and also for adaptiveness, like some plants will totally depend on it. For example, you can say it is a root parasite or a stem parasite. So if it is dependent upon the root or the stem, it is called the root parasite or a stem parasite. Example is Cascata. So they have the structures called hastoria, which helps to get the nutrients from the host. So here, if you see the type of plants, generally the plants are eukaryotes, chlorophyll containing organisms with cellulosic cell wall, and some are partial heterotrophs, such as insectivorous plants, and examples for insectivorous plants are bladderwort and Venus flytrap, or they may be parasites, example Cascata. So these are the different types of the plants or the heterotrophic plants. And next is the Kingdom Plantae. Actually, it includes algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms. So actually, there is a separate chapter that we'll see in detail about all these classes: algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms. So here, if you take algae, we saw that itself that the algae comes under three different kingdoms. As per the Whitaker's classification, it comes under three different kingdoms. That is Monera, which includes blue-green algae or cyanobacteria, and some other algae, that is phytoplanktonic forms like golden algae, and some other algae that comes under the kingdom Protista. And here this Plantae, it includes green algae, brown algae, and red algae. So depending upon whether it is unicellular or the multicellular, there are various types of algae. So algae is categorized, that is different types of algae comes under different kingdom. And then comes the bryophytes. So bryophyte, there's an, actually when you go up in the series, what happens? This is very primitive and aquatic organisms, and slowly they are evolving it into terrestrial forms. So when you come to angiosperms, here they are the most evolved species. So bryophytes, and then comes the pteridophytes. So these three are called the vascular plants. So there is a gradual evolution, algae to angiosperms. So we'll see in detail about the characteristics of each of this classification. So first about algae. So if you take algae, the term algae is given by the scientist, it is the Linnaeus. So you know that the study is called the phycology, which deals with the study of algae. So it covers a wide range of organisms. So it contributes, this algae, it contributes most of the photosynthetic reactions throughout. So algae constitutes a larger proportion and it is surrounded by mucilaginous sheath. Surrounded by mucilaginous sheath. And it has a thalloid-like plant body. That is, the body is not differentiated into algae. The body is not differentiated into root, stem, and leaves. There is no clear differentiation into root, stem, and leaves. And they are autotrophic. They contain many plant pigments like chlorophyll A and beta carotene. And there are different types of algae that comes under the Kingdom Plantae. So the various types of algae are green algae, which is also called chlorophyceae. So here they have the main pigments like chlorophyll A, B, and carotenoids. They have starch as the main storage material. They have and oil droplets. And also they have the structures called pyrenoids. So this pyrenoids, they help in the photosynthesis. It is fixation of carbon dioxide. Then comes the brown algae. It is also called Pyophyceae. Here they have the pigments, that is chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C, and the xanthophyll. Main xanthophyll that is present here is fucoxanthin. Fucoxanthin. That is the brown color of this algae is mainly due to the presence of this fucoxanthin. And also they thrive in shallow water. So depending upon the type of pigment that is present, they can absorb the light. So some type of algae can absorb the red and blue region of the spectrum. So based on that, they can adapt to the particular environment, whether they'll exist in the shallow water or the deep water. So this brown algae, it exists in shallow water. Brown algae or Pyophyceae. Then next is the red algae. Red algae is also called Rhodophyceae. Rhodophyceae. So the main pigments that are present in this red algae are chlorophyll A, then D, and they have a special pigment that is called phycoerythrin. We can generally say phycobilins, that is phycoerythrin and phycocyanin, but the main pigment that is present here is the phycoerythrin, and here they are adapted to survive in deep waters. So they thrive in deep waters. So when you see the algae, the main features about algae are, the term algae is first introduced by Linnaeus, and the study of algae is called phycology, and they are surrounded by the mucilaginous sheath, and their body structure is not differentiated into true root, stem, and leaves. So they have the thalloid body, and they are photoautotrophs. That is, by using the light, they can produce their own food due to the presence of different types of pigments that are present, like chlorophyll A and carotenoids. And there are several divisions like green algae, brown algae, and red algae, which comes under the Kingdom Plantae. So green algae, it is also called chlorophyceae, and it contains the main pigments like chlorophyll A, B, and carotenoids. And this green algae is the evolved form of algae, and it is thought that the higher plants evolved from green algae. So most of the characteristic features of green algae is similar to higher plants. And they have the pyrenoids, which help in photosynthesis. And in the case of brown algae, which is also called Piophyceae, contain chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C, and fucoxanthin. And the color of the brown algae is mainly due to the presence of this fucoxanthin, and they thrive in shallow water. And in the case of red algae, which is also called Rhodophyceae, it contains chlorophyll A, D, and phycoerythrin, and it is adapted to live in deep water. So these are the main features about algae. And when we study the plant kingdom, we'll see in detail about the how it reproduces and other things. We'll see in detail under the algae. So the next is the land plants. So what are the characteristic features of land plants? Here, mostly they are aquatic. So the next, they are slowly evolving into terrestrial forms. So what are the characteristic features of land plants? So first, we know that all these plants are multicellular. Then they have the pigments, and also they have the starch as a storage form of food, and they have the cellulosic cell wall. So these are the features that differs from algae. Though the plantae involves all the multicellular, in the case of algae, some unicellular algae like Chlamydomonas are also included under the Kingdom Plantae. So there are some exceptions. And then gametangia. Gametangia are nothing but the structures which produce the gametes, and they are covered by means of jacket cells. That is, they are covered with cells, and they are well protected in the case of land plants. Then next is the embryo is protected. Embryo is well protected from drying out. That is one of the embryo is protected in the case of land plants. Then they possess an alternation of generation. That is, there are two phases. One is the sporophytic phase, and another one is the gametophytic phase. So they possess an alternation of generation. So these are the characteristic features of land plants. So the algae is a primitive form, and it is mostly aquatic. And then the land plants have the specific features. So the first next to algae is bryophytes. So what are the features of bryophytes? They found actually in damp and shady places. So they cannot exist without water. So they need the damp environment. So they grow only in damp and shady places, and they are called the amphibians of plant kingdom. Called amphibians of plant kingdom. So in the life cycle, for example, if you see all these land plants, there are two types. One is the gametophytic phase, and another one is the sporophytic phase. But here, only the gametophytic phase is more common. Gametophytic phase is more common in the case of bryophytes. We'll see in detail about the alternation of generation. So what is a gametophytic phase? And because here mainly they'll exist in the form of haploid condition, that is N. So you would have N and 2N, that is either haploid or the diploid phase. So here the gametophytic form or the haploid form, it exists in most of the lifetime. So it is a gametophytic phase. And they lack, main feature here is they lack true roots, stem and leaves. So there, in the case of algae, we saw there is no differentiation into root, stem or leaf. Here they lack true roots, but they have the false or the root-like, stem-like and leaf-like structure. So it is a gradual transition from the primitive form to the next evolved form. So these are the main features of bryophytes. That is, they are the amphibians of plant kingdom, and they grow in the damp, shady areas. And the gametophytic phase is more predominant in the case of bryophytes, and they lack true root, stem, and leaves. But they have the false root or the root-like structures, which does the function of root, stem, and leaves in the case of bryophytes. Then next we'll see about the vascular plants. So what do you mean by vascular plants? The other three, that is the pteridophytes, gymnosperms and angiosperms, that comes under the vascular plants. So here the next evolving factor here is the formation of the conductive tissues. For example, xylem and phloem. You could have studied xylem is mainly for the conduction of water and phloem is for the conduction of food materials. So here the vascular plants, which are also called trichophytes. So they have the conducting tissues. Xylem and phloem. And another important differentiation that comes here is they have true roots, stem and leaves. So it includes pteridophytes. So when you see these three, that is pteridophytes, the pteridophytes are also called vascular plants without seeds. The vascular plants without seeds. Then comes gymnosperms. So gymnosperms will have seeds. They are the plants with seeds. But there will be no flowers or fruits. And then comes the further evolution to form the angiosperms, which are also called flowering plants. So vascular plants, they are also called the trichophytes. They have the conducting tissues like xylem and phloem. They have the true roots, stem and leaves. And these includes, that is vascular plants include pteridophytes, gymnosperms and angiosperms. And pteridophytes are vascular plants without seeds, and gymnosperms have seeds. And angiosperms are also called flowering plants. So we'll see in detail about the pteridophytes. So when you see the occurrence of the pteridophytes, they exist in variety of habitats from moist, cool, shady places, and some are aquatic and some are amphibian, that is they can exist in both water as well as on land. So moist, cool, shady places, and they may be aquatic and also amphibians, and some are xerophytes. They grow in desert condition or the dry conditions also. So here there is a slow transition to the terrestrial forms. But the first we saw algae, they occur in the aquatic form, and then next transition is bryophytes, that is they They grow only in damp or the shady places. And the next transition is the pteridophytes, that is, they occur in a variety of habitats from moist, cool, shady places. Some are aquatic, some are amphibian, and some grow even in dry conditions. So there is a transition. And the plant body is mostly saprophytic. Saprophytic plant body. So here there are true roots, stems, and leaves. So the main type of roots that are present in the pteridophytes are adventitious roots. Adventitious roots are mainly present in pteridophytes. But here still they need water for fertilization. It is the presence of water is needed. Water is indispensable for fertilization. In the case of pteridophytes. And all the members that comes under the pteridophytes have the alternation of generation, that is the sporophytic phase and the gametophytic phase. So these are the main features that come under pteridophytes, that is they occur in different habitats, moist, cool, shady places, aquatic, and then some are aquatic, some are amphibians, and some live even in dry conditions. And they have the predominantly as a saprophytic plant body, and they have adventitious roots, and the water is essential for fertilization. So still these up to these pteridophytes, here the main difference between the bryophyte and the pteridophyte is bryophyte, they grow only in damp and shady conditions. Here it is highly evolved, but then even then water is needed for fertilization. And the next transition that comes is there in the case of bryophytes, they don't have the true root, stem, or leaves. But here they have the true root, stem, and leaves. And another one main factor that differentiates the bryophytes and the next class, that is pteridophytes, is here the conducting tissues are present, but those conducting tissues are not present in bryophytes. So next we'll see about the seed plants. So seed plants that include gymnosperms and angiosperms. So till now, there's no formation of seed. So this gymnosperms and angiosperms are called the seed plants. So we'll see detail about the seed plants. Next to pteridophytes are the seed plants. So these are the successful group of plants which possesses seeds. So here also the sporophytic phase is more dominant when compared to the gametophytic phase. So both gymnosperms and angiosperms, they have the sporophytic or the two-end condition, diploid condition is more dominant here. And here also they have the true stem, roots, and leaves. So true stem, roots, and leaves are present. So another important transition here is the water is not required for fertilization. So they become independent, or they can exist. The fertilization can occur even without water in the case of seed plants, that is gymnosperms and angiosperms. So they achieve independent of water as a vehicle for the fertilization. So no need for water. And another one main factor of the seed plants is the embryo is covered. That is the seed protective coat. It covers the embryo and it is highly resistant. So it can exist for many years. Like it can exist in the form of seed and it can be stored for many years. That is one advantage of the seed plants. So first we'll see about gymnosperms. So here they are characterized by the presence of naked ovule. So seeds of these gymnosperms are actually, they are not covered, but in the case of angiosperms, the seeds are present inside the fruit. So here they have the naked ovule and they are called the phanerogams. Phanerogams without ovary. There will be no formation of the fruit. Here only the formation of seed. So without ovary, and the type of root system that is present here is the taproot system. So it includes all the medium-sized trees to the tall-sized trees, and the biggest tree, that is sequoia. The giant redwood tree sequoia is one of the species that comes under the gymnosperms. So gymnosperms are the type of plants which have the naked ovule, and they are called the phanerogams without ovary, and they have the taproot system, and many of the medium-sized and the tall trees that comes under the gymnosperms. And if you see the leaves, so here there is a transition. If you see the leaves are adapted to withstand the extreme temperature and also the humidity and wind. So leaves are well developed and they can adapt extreme conditions. And also in the case of xerophytes, they have the needle-shaped leaves, which reduces the evaporation of water and helps to retain the water in the dry conditions. So, and also they have the sunken stomata. So these are main factors that are present in the xerophytes and which helps in water retention. Needle-shaped leaves and sunken stomata. So when you see the seed plants, they have the true stem, roots and leaves, and the roots help in the absorption of water and other nutrients from the soil. And also stem, it helps it gives support to the plant, and the leaves are well developed and they adapt to extreme conditions of temperature, humidity and wind. And the needle-shaped leaves and the sunken stomata, it helps to prevent the evaporation of the water, that is transpiration. And also they are called the phanerogams without ovaries, since the seeds are not covered with the fruit. So these are the main factors about gymnosperms. So here also well developed conductive tissues, that is xylem and phloem, which helps in the conduction of water and other minerals. The next is the angiosperms. So when you see the angiosperms, what are the main feature is, here there will be formation of flowers and fruits, flowering plants. So the pollen grains and also the ovules, they are developed in specialized structures. They are called the flowers. So the main purpose of the flowers is it attracts the insects and helps in the pollination. And also here they have many cotyledons, that is based on the number of cotyledons that are present, 1 or 2 cotyledons in the seed, monocotyledon and dicotyledons. And presence of fruit is one of the main factor here. And there is another factor that is called the double fertilization, which occurs only in angiosperms. These are the main differentiating factors. So all these plants, that is pteridophytes, gymnosperms and angiosperms, they are called vascular plants, since they have the conducting tissues, xylem and phloem. And angiosperms are called the flowering plants, since they produce flowers and fruits, and they attract the insects and other animals for pollination. And based on the number of cotyledons, they are classified again as monocotyledons and dicotyledons. And there is a special process that is called the double fertilization, which is happening in the case of angiosperms. So when you study in detail about the different classes, we'll see in detail about the structure of the flower and how it helps in the pollination and what are the different structures that are present, that we will see in detail under the specific categories. The next is the alternation of generation. That is, if you take the life cycle of a terrestrial plant, it has two phases. One is called the diploid sporophytic phase, and another one is the haploid gametophytic phase. So these phases alternate with each other, and that is called as the alternation of generation. So all the plants will have both the sporophytic and the gametophytic phase. It depends on, it varies from plants to plants, that which phase is dominant. For example, the first type is called the haploitic type. So here what happens? Gametophyte. This is the gametophytic phases N. That is, it's a haploid gametes, and which forms the zygote. That is 2N, and this zygote by meiosis form again haploid spores. This is haploitic type of cycle. So here again spores will be haploid. So in this haploitic type, the zygote will be the only diploid phase. So this phase exists in most of the leptide. So that is called the haplontic type. But in the case of diplontic type, what happens? The 2N or the diploid condition exists in most of their leptines. So that is called the diplontic type. For example, here it is zygote, that is 2N, and this will grow into a sporophytic plant body. And then this by meiosis it forms spores. So here the N, the spores, it exists only for a limited period. So it is diplontic. There is another type that is called the haplodiplontic. So in this type, this is the gametophyte. This N forms zygote, which is 2N, and forms in sporophyte, also 2N. Then it forms spores by meiosis. So here it depends on the organism. For example, in the case of lower organism, mostly haploitic type is present. But in the case of bryophytes and pteridophytes, depending upon that, for example, in bryophytes, haplodiplontic, here the gametophytic phase will be dominant in the case of bryophytes. But in the case of pteridophytes, here the sporophytic phase would be dominant. But the diplontic type is present in gymnosperms and angiosperms. Gymnosperms and angiosperms. So are you clear? So depending upon the haploid or the diploid phase, we are calling it as haplontic type, diplontic type, or haplodiplontic type. So all the types of plant that has two phases. One is the diploid sporophytic and haploid gametophytic. They alternate with each other. So these are about the plant kingdom. That is, under plant kingdom, we saw about the different type, that is algae, and then bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms. So under that, what are the characteristic features of each of these algae, and what way bryophytes differ from algae, and then how the pteridophytes differ from algae and bryophytes, and what are the significant features of gymnosperms and angiosperms. So in the plant kingdom chapter, we'll see in detail about all these, again, in detail about the reproduction and what are the main uses of all these type of plants. So the next kingdom is Animalia. So in the Animalia, what is the feature that differentiate from Kingdom Plantae to Animalia? So here also they are multicellular, heterotrophic. There it is autotrophic. Here it is heterotrophic, that is dependent on the plants for their food, and they are also eukaryotic organisms. But here they have no cell wall. So the plants have cell wall. So they directly or indirectly depend on plants for food. So all the animals are dependent on plants for food. And based on this, there are several classifications like herbivores, based on the type of food. Herbivores are carnivore, omnivore. There are different types of animals. So they digest the food in an internal cavity and store food resources, glycogen or fat. So here we are seeing the development from a unicellular to a multicellular organism. So when they evolve to a multicellular organism, there occurs a gradual increase in the intake of food, and there is a gradual development of the internal cavity and the alimentary canal, and the form of the storage reserve also, it gets increased as the organism develops. So they digest the food in an internal cavity and they store food resources, glycogen or fat. And then mode of nutrition in the case of animals is holozoic, that is the ingestion of food in the case of animals. Then they have the definite growth pattern and they grow into adults that have a definite shape and size. So how they are getting the definite shape and size? As a result of the well-developed, they have the well-developed muscular and skeletal system. And skeletal system. And higher forms, they show sensory and neuromotor mechanisms, and also they have the well-coordinated nervous system and endocrine system. So different animals, they have the different features. And most of the animals, so they are capable of locomotion, and the sexual reproduction is by copulation of male and female, followed by embryological development. So there occurs an embryological development. And also there occurs a well-developed circulatory system. So in the case of animal kingdom, depending upon the all these factors, so there are different types of that is classifying the animal, different phylums that comes under the kingdom Animalia. So generally the basis of classification is, so I think now you're learning kingdom Animalia in zoology also. So I hope you are clear with it. So on the basis, on what basis we are classifying the animals? One is so Animalia, it includes all the multicellular organisms. So the level of organization is either it is in cellular level or the tissue or the organ or organ system. So you know that each and every organism is made up of cells, and the similar cells, they form a tissues. Similar cells of same function, they form tissues, and these tissues, they coordinate to form an organ, and two or more organs, they'll coordinate for a specific purpose and they form an organ system. So on the basis of this level of organization, and there exists a classification of animals. For example, here it is Sporifera, which is a primitive organism, and then sponges, and then based on the symmetry. I hope you're clear with all these, and that is radial symmetry and bilateral symmetry. That is, if we pass any plane through the body of the organism, if it cuts into equal right and the left, then we'll call it as an bilateral, and if it is not symmetry, we'll call it as an asymmetry. On any plane, if it cuts into equal parts, it is a radial symmetry. So based on the type of symmetry, we can classify the animals, and then based on the body cavity. So what do you mean by the body cavity? It is also called the coelom. This is the body cavity that exists between the body wall and the gut. That is called the coelom. And here depending upon the presence or absence of coelom, and also false coelom, that is pseudo coelomates. So that is one criteria for the classification of animals. So other than this, there are several other factors like, for example, the presence or absence of notochord, chordate, or non-chordates, and then based on the segmentation in the body. So there are different factors which help in the classification of the animals. So there are different phyla like Porifera, Coelenterata or Nidaria, and Ctenophora, Platyhelminthes, Aschelminthes, Annelida, Arthropoda, Mollusca, Echinodermata, Hemichordata, and Chordata. So these are classified, the animals are classified into different phylum, either on the basis of level of organization or the symmetry, and then presence or absence of coelom, segmentation, and also presence or absence of notochord. And there are different types of classification. And even in the organ system, there are several specific types. Like, for example, if you take the digestive system, and also in circulatory system, we can say that animals which have the complete and incomplete digestive system, and open circulatory system and closed circulatory system. So what do you mean by complete and incomplete digestive system? So if they have the two openings, that is one for mouth and one for anus, then that is called the complete digestive system. Here there will be only one opening which access both the mouth and the anus. And if you take the open type of circulatory system, here the blood will be pumped out of the heart and all the organs will be submerged in the blood. But in the case of closed circulatory system, there are specific vessels will be present in which blood flows through it, like arteries, veins, and that is called the closed circulatory system. So depending upon this, so there are so many factors which are useful in classifying the animals. So these are the different types of phylum that comes under the Kingdom Animalia. So I hope you are clear with this, right? The classification as multicellular, that is cellular level, then tissue level, organ system level, then radial symmetry, bilateral symmetry. So I think no need to explain all these because you are thorough with it now in zoology. And also about the different phylums, that is Porifera, Coelenterata, and even you could have studied about the different characteristic features of different phylum like Porifera, Coelenterata, then Nidaria, Ctenophora, Platyhelminthes, Aschelminthes, Annelida, Arthropoda, Mollusca, Echinodermata, Hemichordata, and Chordata. So these are about the different phylum that come under the Kingdom Animalia. So even based on the type of system, organ systems that are present, we are classifying it into complete and incomplete digestive system, and those organisms with open and closed type of circulatory system. So I hope you're clear with this. So under the Kingdom Plantae, so what are all the things that we studied under the Kingdom Plantae? First, the main differentiating factor of Kingdom Plantae is they are the organisms that have the chlorophyll, so they are autotrophs and they have the cell wall. So when we study the cells chapter, we'll see in detail about the cell structure and what is the difference between the plant cell and the animal cell. Main thing is the cell ball and also other photosynthetic organelles like chloroplasts are present in the plant cells. So those type of differences we'll see when we study about the cells. So here under Plantae, the different types that we saw are the parasitic plants and the insectivorous or the carnivorous plants. And then we saw about the different categories like algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, then gymnosperms and angiosperms, and about the alternation of generation between the gametophytic phase and the sporophytic phase, and what is the haplontic life cycle and diplontic and haplodiplontic life cycle. So in all the land plants, there occurs an alternation of generation. So it differs from type plant to plant. So each plant will have a specific either gametophytic phase or a sporophytic phase. And then under Kingdom Animalia, the main difference here is they don't have the cell wall, and heterotrophic and holozoic mode of nutrition is present in the case of animals. So we saw about the different phylums that comes under the Kingdom Animalia. They are classified on the basis of the cellule, that is level of organization, or the type of symmetry, presence or absence of notocard, and the segmentation. So many criteria or the characteristics are there in classifying the animals into different phyla. So with this, and then we'll see in detail about the Kingdom Plantae in the next chapter. So we'll discuss few questions related to this. Any doubts? Are you clear with this? So the first question is, select the false statements. Kingdom Plantae includes multicellular chlorophyll containing organisms. Plantae includes bryophytes, 2 angiosperms, but not algae. Plantae shows alternation of generation between gametophytic phase and saprophytic phase, 2N, all. So which is the correct answer for this? Okay, option B. Yeah, good, Nandini. So this is the correct thing. That is, it includes, Plantae includes all multicellular chlorophyll containing organism, and they also show alternation of generation, and it includes bryophytes too. But algae also comes under the Plantae. So this is the false statement. So B is the option. Which of the following pairs is false? Bladderwort, which is an insectivorous plant. Venus flytrap, which is an insectivorous plant. Cascata is a saprophytic plant. And cell wall of plant cell is mainly cellulosic. So which is the correct option? Yeah, good. Option C. Cascata is a parasitic, not a saprophytic. So these are correct options. Bladderwort and Venus flytrap or insectivorous, but here Cascata is a parasitic, not a saprophytic. So this is also correct option. So what is the difference between saprophytic and parasitic? It depends on the living organism as a host. Saprophytic means it depends on the dead organism for its food. So C is the correct option. Kingdom Animalia is characterized by heterotrophic eukaryotic multicellular organisms having no cell wall in their cells, and they have the reserved food as glycogen or fat, and they have holozoic nutrition all. So which is the correct option? Yeah, good, option D. Because everything is correct regarding the Kingdom Animalia. Distinction of prokaryota and eukaryota is mainly based on nucleus only, cell organelles only, and chromosome only, all of the above. So what is the difference between prokaryote and eukaryote? Yes, correct. All the above. Option D. Good. All of the above. Because the nucleus is present in the case of eukaryotes, there only nucleoid is present, and membrane bound cell organelles, and in the chromosome structure also there occurs an variation between prokaryotes and eukaryotes. So all of the above. At least half of the total carbon dioxide fixation on Earth is carried out through photosynthesis by angiosperms, lycopods, algae, and bryophytes. So which is the correct option? Yes, option C, algae. Good. Option C, algae. So most of the photosynthesis that is carried out on the Earth is with the help of algae. Which pigments are found in brown algae? Whether it is chlorophyll A and C, chlorophyll A and D, chlorophyll A and chlorophyll C and fucoxanthin, chlorophyll A and phycoerythrin. In the case of brown algae, it is given. Yeah, good. It is option C. Because fucoxanthin is the main xanthophyll that is present in brown algae, which is responsible for giving the brown color. And phycoerythrin means it's the red pigment that is present in red algae. So the correct option is option C. The members of Phaeophysia or brown algae are found primarily in freshwater, marine water, terrestrial habitat, and on rock. So brown algae is particularly. So do you know about this brown algae? Oh, actually, the brown algae is particularly found in a marine habitat. That is also called the seaweeds. Yeah, option B is the correct option for this. The members of Phaeophysia or brown algae are found primarily in marine habitat and not in the freshwater. So B is the correct option. Okay. So according to 5 kingdom system of classification, Chlamydomonas, Chlorella, and yeast should be placed under Protista, Plantae, Fungi, or Animalia. So under which kingdom they should be placed? And do you know the answer for this, Nandini? Okay, see the options. That is, if you see the Protista, we know that all the unicellular eukaryotes should be included under Protista. So for 8, actually the answer is option A. Why it is option A? Because this Chlamydomonas, Chlorella, and yeast, they are all unicellular. So they should be placed under the Protista. But what happened? This Chlamydomonas and Chlorella, they are placed under Plantae, under the algae. And also yeast is placed under fungi. So actually, according to 5 kingdom system of classification, Chlamydomonas, Chlorella, and yeast should be placed under Protista, but they are placed under, these are all the exceptional cases, that they are placed under Plantae and fungi. So actually, they should be placed under Protista. So are you clear with this now? So A is the correct option. Are you clear? Yeah. So with this, we have completed the introduction about Kingdom Plantae and Animalia, and tomorrow we'll see about the viruses, virions, prions and lichens. With that, we will end up with the chapter biological classification. So I hope you are clear with this. Any doubts in this?